We are now recording.
Great.
All right.
Welcome, everyone, to the October Education, Communication, and Outreach Working Group for the Maryland Commission on Climate Change.
Make sure you say August.
August, sorry.
Yeah.
What I'm thinking, I'm advancing.
No problem.
So our agenda today is pretty simple. We have a wonderful guest speaker today, Jennifer Carmen. I'm going to introduce you in just a second. And then after that, we're going to go straight into our recommendations for the 2024 MCCC report. We have 3 recommendations that are preliminarily drafted. We're going to be discussing them. We can edit them on the fly as we talk about them, and discuss any other options and hopefully take a vote. But if we don't, we might have to schedule kind of an intermediate meeting, as those are due on September 19th. And usually we meet every other month. So let's get started. I'm going to introduce Jennifer. Jennifer Carmen is Deputy Research Manager for the Yale Program on Climate Change Communication. And she's here to discuss their most recent research, which is climate change on the American mind. Her research interest at Yale is at the intersection of climate change adaptation and human behavior, focusing on how people can both protect themselves and advance the common good in the face of increasing climate change impacts. Jennifer, do you want to share your slides, or do you need me to?
Sure. I have them ready. I will hit share. We'll see. And as always, we'll see if it works.
Okay.
Okay. So you should be able to see a full screen presentation, climate change in the American mind.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Great. All right, then I'm going to get started. So thank you so much once again for the introduction and for having me here today. As Amy mentioned, my name is Jennifer Carmen. I am the Deputy Research Manager and the Deputy Director of Survey Research at the Yale Program on Climate Change Communication. And today I will be presenting recent findings from the Climate Change in the American Mind study, as well as some broader insights from our work. So to give you to give you a roadmap for my remarks today, first I'll start with some study background, share some of our key recent findings, and then talk about ways that YPCCC can support your work, as well as key lessons from our work overall. So first, a little background about our study, Climate Change in the American Mind, which you might also hear me sometimes call CCAM. And this is a twice yearly nationally representative survey in the United States that we've been running in partnership with George Mason University's Center for Climate Change Communication. And it's been running since 2008. It tracks variations in Americans' opinions about climate change over time. And we also do analysis by political party. And so that's what some of the results I'll be talking about today. And I will also be sharing some results from our most recent wave, which was conducted in April and early May of this year. So some key findings from that. The first is that more than 2/3 of Americans think that global warming is happening. I really want to start here because this is the most basic fact about American opinion on climate change, but a lot of people don't know it. And this is a question that we've been asking since CCAM started in 2008. And so you can see this green line across the top, which is tracking the percentage of Americans who think that global warming is happening as a percentage from 2008 until 2024. And the black line at the bottom is the percentage who think that global warming is not happening. And then the difference between them is people who don't know. But you can also see that it's never been less than half of Americans in the entire time that we've been running this study, and it's been more than 2/3 of Americans since about 2016. The other finding that I wanted to share is that most registered voters in the US support many climate-related policies. And this is a lot of findings right here, so this is something that I'm going to talk you all through. But as part of our study, we do focused analysis on registered voters, including comparisons by political party and ideological group, which is what you're seeing here. And in our most recent survey, we found that a lot of very specific policies, including those that are included in the Inflation Reduction Act, are popular and have even bipartisan support, including providing federal funding to help farmers improve their farming practices, to protect and restore the soil so it absorbs more carbon. More than 90% of Democrats, both liberal and moderate Democrats, support this. And so those are the dark blue and light blue circles that you see here. The black diamond shows the percentage of registered voters overall, which is 86% of registered voters. The pink circle shows the percentage of liberal and moderate Republicans who support the policy, and that's 81%. And the dark red circle shows the percentage of conservative Republicans who support the policy, and in this case, that's 71%, so a solid majority. And many other policies have support, especially from moderate Republicans, and even like non-zero support, a solid base of support from even conservative Republicans. And this includes things like developing a national program to train people who work in the fossil fuel industry for new jobs in the renewable energy industry, such as wind and solar, has 95% support among liberal Democrats, more than 90% support among moderate Democrats, 77% support among registered voters overall, 72% support among moderate Republicans, and even 45% support among conservative Republicans. And other policies such as tax rebates also have really high support among both parties, including non-zero levels of support, even if it's not an outright majority. So things like providing tax rebates for people who purchase energy efficient vehicles or solar panels. Again, more than 90% support among liberal and moderate Democrats, 77% support among registered voters overall, 74% support among moderate Republicans, so solid like and majority support, and even 48%, so about half of conservative Republicans. And then providing tax credits and rebates to encourage people to buy electric appliances such as heat pumps or induction stoves that run on electricity instead of oil or gas, one of the big underlying electrification goals for that transition. Has 88% support among moderate Democrats, 96% support among liberal Democrats, 74% support among registered voters overall, 69% support, again, solid majority among liberal and moderate Republicans, and 42% support even among conservative Republicans. And even things that you wouldn't necessarily think have a solid support among conservative Republicans might have more support than you realize. So even regulating carbon dioxide, the primary greenhouse gas, as a pollutant. So even a question that has regulation in the title, in the name, has 42% support among conservative Republicans and 68% support among moderate Republicans, 74% among registered voters overall, and more than 90% support among liberal and moderate Democrats. And then finally, the one that has the most divide between the parties is transitioning the U.S. economy, including electric utilities, transportation, buildings, and industry from fossil fuels to 100% clean energy by 2050. So the big energy transition goal still has very high support among Democrats, 87% support among moderate Democrats, 95% support among liberal Democrats, 66% support of registered voters overall, and about half of moderate Republicans even. So 55% support, and this is the one that has the lowest support among conservative Republicans at only 23%. And so one thing that I also want to point out whenever I talk about these policy supports, one thing I always want to note is when we look at the divide within parties, nearly all Democrats, including both liberal and moderate Democrats, support all of these policies, and there's really very little difference between these two groups. And by contrast, there's a huge gap between moderate and conservative Republicans on most of these policies, especially when compared with the Democrats. And what this suggests is that Democrats overall, moderate and liberal, pretty universally support climate action, and they're also pretty united in their support. Republicans, however, are not united in their opposition, and in fact, many Republicans actually support these policies once they're explained. So the key takeaway from all of this is that most Americans support action on global warming. So why do we think that they don't? And the reason is that a big reason is that most Americans don't talk about it. And so this is another question that we've tracked since the beginning of the study, asking people how often do they talk about global warming with their family and friends? And the black line on the top is the percentage who say that they rarely or never talk about it. And the green line on the bottom is the percentage who say that they often or occasionally talk about it. And you can see that this is almost the flip of the percentages who believe that global warming is happening. And what this means is that many people support climate action, but don't know that the others around them also support it, creating what's called a spiral of silence. And as you can see there, that this line has stayed pretty much the same for almost the entire time that we've done this study. In fact, it may have even gone down a little bit compared to when it was asked at the beginning. And another finding that you can't see here necessarily is that only about 5% of people in our most recent study say that they talk about it often. And research has found that Americans significantly underestimate how much other Americans support climate action. And part of that is that we don't know because we don't talk about it with each other. And that's why the climate scientist Katharine Hayhoe says the most important action you can take on climate change is to talk about it. And since this is and part of why I bring this up is this is a climate comms focused working group. And so I'm guessing that breaking that spiral is a big part of your work. And for the next part of my talk, I'm going to talk about some of the ways that we know and the resources that we offer for how to talk about climate change. And so at the Yale Program on Climate Change Communication, we offer a whole lot of tools and resources, which I'm going to be sharing here. The first is one you may already be familiar with based on our work, which is the Global Warming 6 Americas, which is a way of thinking about audiences for communication. And so based on our research, and I say our research, but it's really people who have been there much longer than I have, but there are 6 different audiences for messaging related to global warming and climate change in the US. And so they exist on a spectrum from the people who have the highest belief in global warming, are the most concerned, are the most motivated to act, to the people who have the lowest belief and are least concerned and least motivated to act. And so as of the our most recent measurement, these are the 6 Americas and as of the end of 2023. And so the percentages change, the groups stay the same. We have the alarmed, the people who think that it's happening, who think that we need to do something about it, who are willing to act and want action to happen. You have the concerned people who are worried about climate change, think that it's happening, but aren't as motivated to act as the alarmed. You have the cautious, the people who are like, yeah, global warming is happening, but I don't know if it's really that big of a deal. The disengaged, which is the smallest percentage of the population overall, which are people who have never really thought about climate change and don't really know much about it. And then you have the doubtful, who are people who are like, I've heard about global warming. Is it really happening? Like, I don't know. And then you have the dismissive, who are the ones who say outright, climate change is a hoax. This is BS. We don't need to do anything about it. And one thing you can also see just from looking at the distribution of percentages across the US population is that there are a lot more people who are alarmed and concerned than there are who are doubtful or dismissive. And over the last 15 years of our study, the alarmed is the group that has grown by far the most over time. And so I share this as a communication resource also because different audiences have different interests and approaches to thinking about climate change. And so they need to be engaged in different ways. So for example, the people who are alarmed should tend to be more focused on action. That tends to be what they want to know about and a better way to engage them. Whereas people who are cautious are more likely to be need more persuasion on why this issue is important and that they need to do something about it. So one tool that we also offer related to the 6 Americas is called the 6 Americas Super Short Survey, or SASSY, which is a 4-question survey which lets you figure out which of these 6 Americas that you're in, or an audience that you're trying to reach, like which of these 6 Americas are they in. And we also, as part of the SASSY tool, offer resources for thinking about how to approach each of these different audiences. Another tool that we offer that's especially great at the local level are the Yale Climate Opinion Maps, which show how Americans' climate change beliefs and risk perceptions and policy support vary at the state, congressional district, metro area, and county levels. And so these are percentages based on aggregated results from the Climate Change in the American Mind study, and they're actually updated every year. And so the most recent version was published a few months ago and has data through 2023. And so this is an example that I think is interesting because it's the percentage of adults in the US who are worried about global warming. And so you can see at the top there, the national average is 64%, but by county in the United States, there's a lot of variation. These yellows and oranges show places where most people think that are worried about global warming, and the blues are places where less than half of people are worried. And also, to go back to the point that I made earlier, and also something that I wanted to show with these maps is the percentages of people who talk about climate change. And so, as I just showed on the previous map, most people are worried about it. Worry is all over the place. But as you can see from looking at this map, most of it is blue. The places that people talk about, there are very few places that people are actually talking about global warming very much. But using this tool, especially for a Maryland group, I wanted to show like how you can examine what people in Maryland think. And so this is the map for worried, and you can see that all of Maryland is pretty orange, indicating that they're moderately to very worried. But there is also some variation here. So here I have this broken out by congressional district, but you can also look at metro areas and counties. But so, for example, like the sixth congressional district in Maryland, about 66% of people are estimated to be worried about global warming, which is about at the national average, a little bit higher, but that can inform engagement when talking with people there. And also looking at how much do people talk about global warming. So this is 40% at the state level, and so it's a little bit higher. It's 4 percentage points higher than the national average. Another thing that this tool shows at the state level is changes over time. So you can see that there was an increase around 2015, and it's been about flat for the past few years in terms of people talking about global warming. And then I also wanted to bring this up because you can look at this again at the congressional district level to see the variation in which districts people are most likely to talk about global warming. And so maybe take a second and decide which congressional district in Maryland has the most people who talk about global warming. And the one that's in orange is in Virginia, so that one doesn't count. But it's the 8th congressional district. It has the most, 49% say that they talk about global warming at least occasionally, which is 13 percentage points above the national average. And then finally, we have a fact sheets tool, which lets you create a customized one-page summary of the public opinion questions, including the ones that I showed earlier, as well as a whole bunch of others. It lets you summarize them for a specific location. And this basically takes all of that information, shows it to you in one place. And so this is an example from Congressional District 7 in Maryland, which is where Baltimore is. And you all know that, I'm sure. But this tool is also designed to be shared. And so you can output all of these different questions, but you can also save it as a PDF. You can share it to social media, but it's a whole bunch of different information about a single location in one place. And you can also customize it to include more or fewer questions if as needed. Okay, so great. And so you may be wondering, how can I find this tool? This sounds really useful. And so this is where you can find it. I have a link here. I also have a QR code that I have made available, especially for an online talk. And so once you go to this site, what I have here is like how you actually input location data into the fact sheet. So you have a drop down where you select the state. You can do either the county or the congressional district level. And so one also nifty thing about it is that there's a button up there so that you can translate it into Spanish if you want to do that. And then once you choose the questions you want to include, the place that you want to include, you just hit this button, generate fact sheet, and it creates that fact sheet for you. And so another place that you can find this is just on our website, which is climatecommunication.yale.edu. We have a drop down here just under our visualizations and data. So you can find the maps that I was just showing you, as well as the fact sheets. And it'll just take you all right there. And finally, I feel as somebody from an organization, I have to shout out our mailing list. So you can also sign up for our mailing list if you're not on there already to keep updated on our new research and tools as they come out. And so now that I've gone into the details of some of our recent findings and our tools to help you use our research, I'd like to take a step back to some of our big picture lessons that we've learned from our work. The first is that when talking about climate change, you really need to keep it simple. And there are really 5 key facts and 10 words that everybody needs to understand about climate change. 1, it's real. 2, it's us, it's human caused. 3, it's bad. 4, scientists agree. And 5, there's hope. So it's real, it's happening, it's us, it's human caused, it's bad. There are reasons to be worried about it. 4, scientists agree that there is scientific consensus. We have done research that finds that that's especially persuasive for people who are on the fence. 5, there's hope that there are things we can do about it. Another thing to keep in mind about these 5 facts in 10 words, especially going back to the 6 Americas, is that different Americas need to think about different facts, basically. So when thinking about the cautious, or even the doubtful messages around scientists agree are actually more persuasive. Talking about the strength of the scientific consensus. How do we know that this is happening? Why should we care about it? But for people who are alarmed, they already know, these first 4 messages, but talking about why there's hope, why we think that action matters is really important for promoting action. The second lesson is that personal stories are effective. We know that these are persuasive, especially for people, I was going to say especially for people who are on the fence, but they're really effective with everyone, because we also know that most people don't connect the dots between their concrete experiences and an abstract concept like global warming, even if they're worried about it in general. So if you want to talk about global warming, your own personal stories and the personal stories of the people around you are a great place to start. And talking with people about their personal stories is also a great place to start. Because one thing that we can take for granted is that we all have personal stories all the time. And so and whenever I talk about this, I always update this slide because there's always something new you can put here. And so this is a photo from Annapolis from just last week with the flooding from Hurricane Debby. And we can, of course, get into the attribution science of this particular event. But overall, hurricanes are getting stronger and causing more damage because of climate change. And we are experiencing events that haven't happened before. You and I are experiencing events that have never happened before. And as I said, people don't talk about that, but just saying it aloud kind of grabs people's attention, and that can be compelling. The third strategy that we recommend is persuasion through trusted messengers. And this is especially important for audiences who are on the fence about climate change and the need for action, which includes and is not exclusive to Republicans. So for example, what I have here is a photo from one of our recent research studies called the New Climate Voices campaign. And this is a campaign targeted at Republicans relying on trusted messengers like evangelical Christians, like military people who are aligned with Republican values. And this person here is a retired Air Force General Ron Keyes. And it used messages aligned with people's values, such as talking about national security threat of climate change. Why does the military care about climate change? And as a result, this campaign shifted Republicans' views on climate change. So in summary, most Americans support action on climate change, but they don't always talk about it. And so that's why we need to break the spiral of silence. And some ways to do that are offering clear facts, personal stories, and trusted messengers. These are all effective ways to talk about climate change. And then last, YPCCC offers an array of database tools and programs to help your work, especially so that you can look at a climate change opinion, not just nationally, but in your local area. So that concludes my main remarks. Thank you all again for having me here, and to our research partners at GMU and our funders who make this work possible. And finally, thank you to all of you for the work that you're doing, because I'm always excited to talk with groups whose job is to talk about climate change, because as I've been saying here, it's so incredibly important. So thank you.
Thank you so much. That was great. Oh, and first question already. Corey.
Yeah, I was just going to ask if there is an open floor for questions.
Absolutely.
That's my question. Okay. So my question is less of a question and more of a comment. Jennifer, I just want to let you know these resources that are available through the Yale Climate Communication website have been absolutely life-changing for me as a climate communicator. And I also wanted to say that the trusted messenger piece, these videos I'm going to be looking at is new to me. But I always like to remind folks when I present about climate communication and the power behind it, that they are also trusted messengers, and that every single person in the room is a trusted messenger to others, and which is why it's so important to talk. So even though these individuals might be, military or faith-based or something along those lines, really, they don't have to be superheroes in those domains. They can also be sitting right in front of you, looking at yourself in the mirror. So trusted messengers are all around. But thank you, Jennifer. That was great.
Well, and thank you for saying that. It's very worth saying. We don't that what this presentation here was about, like, yeah, trusted messengers to Republicans, but yes, exactly. Everybody has people that they can talk to.
Jabari?
Yeah, excellent presentation, Jennifer. So thank you so much for that. I learned quite a bit. I love the slide about the 5 facts in 10 words because that makes everything so simple, and and it's so accurate. You work closely with George Mason University, right? So it's kind of like a collaboration with between Yale and George Mason. Is that correct? Or
The Climate Change in the American Mind survey is, yeah, the main
Okay.
study. Yeah, we have other programs that we run independently of them, but yes.
Okay. Yeah, I was actually oh, sorry, somebody saying something? Okay. No, actually I was on the panel with Greg Farley. I'm not sure how familiar you are with him at George Mason, but I think he's sustainability, but I'm not sure how, if he's actually part of the center or not. But really one of the questions I had was about one of the maps that you had up. And I think on the map it was showing the differences between the levels of, I guess, belief in climate change. And I mean, it was really quick. It was a really quick slide, so I didn't capture, in totality. But it seemed like those areas in those lighter blue, in the lighter blue color, was geographically more in the Midwest and in the plain states. So I mean, I do realize sometimes there's a political difference also in certain areas of the country. Do you think though that's maybe more the politics, or could that be something more so, to your point about personal stories? Do they not see it in the same way that other parts of the country may be visibly seeing climate change? I mean, they deal with it clearly, we all do. And they've had some flooding incidents in the Midwest that have been, crazy. But I wonder, since they're not on the coast, not on the water, maybe not seeing the hurricanes, the level of flooding that we're seeing, do you think that could be possibly a contributing factor? Or is it political, or is it both? What do you think?
I think it's more political than it is like location. Because we know, like, and you can even see from our policy, like our political party breakouts, that there is a huge political divide on climate change. I think there is all, like, it's something that we've been exploring as well, of just like, the it's not just belief in climate change, it's also a mistrust of a lot of the solutions. Like you saw from those policy items, that once it comes down to like talking about a 100% renewable energy transition, that's when conservative Republicans are like, nope. And so but I do, and I think that it's, how do I want to put this? I totally agree with you that it's like the facts of what is happening are there. It is in part, and it is in part about just not making that connection to climate change. It is that not talking about it. It is like, but I'm also thinking about this documentary that I just saw, that the filmmaker is somebody who came and spoke to our organization just a couple of weeks ago, and it's a documentary that's not out yet. I don't think it's called True, False, Hot, Cold. And what he did was he went to a county in Utah, Emery County, which has one of the lowest rates of like belief in climate change and worry about climate change in the country. And he just talked with the people who were there about like their concerns about the future, but also what they thought about climate change. And when he would ask them of like, do you think that it's getting hotter? Is it hotter now than it used to be when you were growing up? And like a lot of people were like, oh yeah, right, like it rains a lot less, and like, but a lot of what people were talking, but when the question became, well, is this climate change, and is this human caused climate change? And that was where kind of the resistance came in. And so, but also a lot of people had never really talked about it or thought about it much before. So it's all of those things. It's like, yeah. So it's a very complicated why.
Right.
Yeah. So that's a long way of saying that having these conversations is important, and that's why, I guess.
Okay. Appreciate that.
All right, Astrid has her hand up too.
Thank you. Great presentation. I'm a big fan of that initiative from you guys. I'm on the mail list and I use it a lot in a lot of my science communication presentations. I am curious about one of the things that Catherine Hayhoe always brings up, which is the map of people who believe in climate change and that is happening, and then the map that asks, is it going to affect you personally? And a lot of people, the vast majority, say no. So in terms of communicating about climate science, and we know there are studies that when people experience extreme events and stuff like that, they are more likely to support resilience measures and everything. So how do this connect with your advice and your tools to address the different groups of the six Americas? You know, how, because it has to be from a lot of different of the six parts of the six Americas to make that vast majority, right?
Yeah, and so that's right. And so I think that, and also those maps that Catherine Hayhoe shows actually are these same maps, the same map tool. It's different questions on the same tool. So yeah, so it's something that we do also know from our research, and that's also like the alarmed. While it has grown a lot, it's still, you know, only between a quarter and a third of the country. And so the people who are alarmed are the ones who are who say the most strongly that they think that global warming will affect them personally. That's sort of what differentiates the alarmed from the other audiences in the six Americas. And so I think that, yeah, so in terms of moving people along the ladder, there are a lot of ways to do that. And the fact that we are experiencing more extreme events is becoming like an increasing way for people to have those kinds of conversations. It gives people a springboard for something to talk about. Yeah, I think that, yeah, when it comes to that would, I mean, yeah, I don't know if I can give more advice other than just like having those conversations and talking about it, but also thinking about, you know, what's the word? Teachable moments from extreme weather events, and thinking of, and, you know, using those.
Thanks.
Jessica, you got your hand up? Oh, we can't hear you. I think you're unmuted though.
You guys hear me okay?
Now I can.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. I've been having microphone issues all day, but Jennifer, I really appreciate the presentation. I thought it was really great. Something that I do on my end, I focus on outreach, and I work with a number of different nonprofit clients. And something that I found interesting is that the research that was conducted was kind of like at the family level. Is there a difference when it comes to starting these conversations, having these narratives, when looking at different age groups, say talking to millennials versus Gen Z or Gen Alpha?
It's a great question.
It is a great question. I guess when I hear that question, I'm wondering if you mean like, you know, like young people, because I do like, I have like a 17-month-old and I have no idea how I'm going to talk with him about climate change. But in terms of like, one thing also with like very young people is like making sure that like not to overwhelm with the negativity. Like I think that is one of the big findings that I've seen from like studies with like youth. And this might also be the case with young people generally, is like that talking about the there's hope aspect of it, because I think a lot of young people have really heard the really negative things about climate change, and it can induce a lot of like despair and like reason not to have hope, which it can actually depress the likelihood of taking action. But also, I'm trying to think, because we haven't done a whole lot of like age targeted communication, but I also do know of like programs that are not programs, but there's like an initiative of like grandparents like of who want to take climate action to protect their grandchildren. And so I think that it's like it's specific, but also kind of universal insofar as everyone has something that they care about, and climate change affects things that they care about. And so grandparents care about their grandchildren, parents care about their children. Kids care, kids care about the future. They care about the life that they'll be growing up into and the life that they'll be having. And so talking about those things can be a way into having that.
Thank you.
Oh, Peyton?
Hi. So yeah, I had a question about the communications recommendations that you guys have. And I was specifically curious if you had any resources or recommendations related to communicating in a landscape of mis and disinformation.
No. Yeah, it's really hard. Is like the short version. I'm trying to think, because that we have a colleague based in the UK named Sander van der Linden. I don't know if you know his work, but combating mis and disinformation is his particular field of study. And what he has done, what they've found is most effective is something that's called inoculation, which is providing people with like a counter to, the cranky uncle, yes. And so providing people with that information that can counter the disinformation even before they find that disinformation in the wild. The challenge, of course, with that is that once people, like, inoculation only works if people haven't been exposed. So I wish that I had a better answer for that, to be honest. I think that, because the thing the other thing that I think of that has been effective, not necessarily in counting mis and disinformation, but just in talking with people who are skeptical of action, is something that's called deep canvassing, which is having conversations with people and really understanding their own reasons, but also understanding their reasons for opposition, but also talking them through the reasons for your support, right? And so this has been done in other contexts. And so I think that once you're dealing with somebody who has that, that is often the way to approach it. It also depends on like whether they trust you as them. Like it gets back into also the trusted messenger of like whether they trust you to even be the one to counter that disinformation, whether you can have that conversation from a basis of trust where they feel like you're not judging them and like making them feel bad, and all you want to do is make them change their mind. So yeah, but it's a really thorny problem with no easy solution. I can't offer a better answer than that.
No, I really appreciate what you had to say. Yeah, I was specifically curious because I feel like there's some overlap between the communication on that side of things with like this idea of a trusted messenger, and also on the alternative side. So yeah, just curious about what your thoughts were. So thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah.
You're on mute, Amy.
I have one question. I'm a child of the 80s that went through the ozone crisis and saw the world come together and, commit to a fix that is now actually, showing that worked. But as a child of the 80s, that was a very specific and direct message. This is the problem. X is the fix. In this case, we don't have one fix. We have a lot of fixes. Have you guys done any kind of analysis on how that variety of options is affecting people's way to process climate action? Because that's generally my concern is a lot of people especially with disinformation and misinformation. On top of that, you have changing information and confusing information, which is making it hard for people to know, even if they're alarmed, what steps to take.
Yeah. An interesting way of thinking about it, like, well, because it's something that's just been on my mind lately as well, of like how the way that I thought of it is that not buying into climate change often comes from a distrust of the solutions. Like I've encountered this like in talking with people about climate change, of like I remember having a conversation with someone of like, well, I don't want to go back to the horse-drawn buggy era, so like why do you say that climate change is happening? And it's so like, and I think that trying to think of something like of coming at it from that angle, like of whether people's attitude towards specific solutions has been found to be related to like their attitudes, and also if talking about different solutions. Like one thing we do know is that talking about renewable energy specifically, and the benefits of renewable energy, like that can be a way even on with Republicans to like increase their buy-in without necessarily like starting from climate change. So it definitely is possible to have those conversations, like, and to like, and also just to be thoughtful about like what action you're motivating people toward.
Laura, you are up next.
So I really appreciated, Jennifer, what you said about just communicating, like that a lot of people don't realize that other people support because of that. And it just reminds me about the need, whether it's this group, the eco group, or I work with green schools, it's about communicating those messages effectively and sharing those stories, which I think you also mentioned at the beginning of your talk. So it's just a really good kind of eye opener in terms of actions that we need to do as a community, but then we can do also within our own, we are a community within this group, but then within the communities that we also reach within our work and organizations.
Thank you. Corinne?
Yeah, Amy, I loved your comment about the ozone hole and being a child of the 80s, because I was also a child of the 80s, and I often use the ozone issue of that era as an example of a success story when talking about climate and how important it is when people make their voices known and their expectations and their considerations known, and how, all of us talking about this issue can result in a solution that we can see changes in our lifetime if we start to talk about it and just start making it an important issue in our lives and have it be part of our culture and conversations. And so I often point to that that specific example. DDT is another good success story where people spoke up, they saw the science, and we have eagles again and pelicans and peregrine falcon. So I just think that's a great example of a success story too, Amy. And yeah, there was a targeted message, and it was something tangible that we could all kind of imagine. I will say this, it's funny because sometimes people confuse the ozone hole with climate change, and sometimes want to know why these greenhouse gases aren't really escaping through the hole in the ozone layer, which is completely different science and very confusing. So being mindful of that can be also helpful.
Yeah, I feel like when you related to the ozone, so the ozone was a simpler, complex concept to convey and a simpler solution to convey. And yes, there was a big lobby against it and lots of things, huge industry change, but it was much more easier concept and message for people to get behind. Climate change is so complex in some instances, and now that we're really starting to see the changes, I think some people are waking up to it. But before then, there was so much different science, so many different solutions. Again, things that didn't necessarily pan out. We were all told to recycle, then we were all told recycling is just not worth its value. Those kind of things have damaged the progress, I think, that some of the belief in these systems, because we didn't jump on a good, strong single message. I'm a message person. Strong single message solution, something you can get behind. So, yeah. All right. Any other questions for Jennifer before we move on to the recommendations? Jennifer, you are welcome. That was wonderful, and you are welcome to stay and listen to the things we're recommending this time. And I'm sure these are going to be lively discussions on these recommendations, as they are every year.
I feel like I should I feel kind of awkward like being an observer. So I think I want to let you all have your open discussion, but I'm very but please, yeah, I'd love to hear what you all develop as your next steps. It's very, as I said in my remarks, I think it's so cool that this group exists. I'm very excited for the work that you're doing, and I'm excited to see what you come up with.
Great. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks,
so
Jennifer.
much.
Yeah, thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your day.
You too.
Bye.
All right, everybody. So let's go. That was wonderful and inspiring, and actually can probably impact our discussion this afternoon. So, so such good information. So we sent out the recommendations to all the committee members. I hope you all had a chance to review them. I got some email feedback, but you know, now it's time to kind of dig in. I don't know if we're going to get through them by 4:30, but let's see what we can do. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. What I sent you, I have in a Google Doc that I can simply start editing. And Jabari can also access, as can Chris Beck, and we can get in there and edit. Laura Collard also, she set it up for us. So let me share my screen. Where's the share button? Go. There. Sorry. All these virtual meetings, they do it a different way. Okay. Can you all see the Word doc?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, great. So the first recommendation, I'm going to talk about the first recommendation. Jabari's going to talk about the second two. Because I'm more of the communications person, and Jabari's more the education person, and he has way more knowledge and experience in that, and I have more expertise in just messaging and communications. It's also our passion. So our first goal, and it actually fits on the screen, which was nice, is very much a carryover from last year and the year before, which is we need to enlist Marylanders in the fight on climate change. And we believe one of the main methods to do that is to get them, again, to have these conversations, to start getting the message out there, to start having, you know, giving folks the resources that they need and prod them to action. And to do that, we think that it needs to be kind of a combination, multi-year, all of government campaign, as well as a really robust and substantial website that's providing them the information they need about possible impacts to their own properties and own lives, as well as resources, you know, incentives, like what can those steps that they can take in a very simple way. So last year it had been a much longer recommendation. We did shorten it up quite a bit this year, but I would love to get feedback on this. I've gotten a little bit of feedback as well, email on this one, an example of a previous campaign to help us with some of the financial goals. So I'll just open it up. You can raise your hand, or if you'd like to comment on this one. Jessica.
Sure. So I'll jump right in. I know I kind of emailed you previously. I wasn't sure if my other call was going to run long. Something that stood out to me was on the recommendation 1, enlist all Marylanders to fight climate change. It wasn't until the end of that first paragraph that I really, you know, was able to capture that it's an outreach campaign, that's an outreach initiative. My recommendation would be to say outright, to, you know, provide outreach to the state of Maryland, to Marylanders. I think that word is powerful, and I think people understand the necessity of it, and we should really just put that front and center.
I think that makes complete sense. I mean, we did rework the titles with thoughts in mind to what might be welcome through bipartisan legislators' minds.
Mhm.
So we, saying that we wanted to do a public campaign in the recommendation title, which we did previously, we thought maybe we should take a step back and be like, you know what, that's not the end goal of this. That's the method. The goal is to get all Marylanders involved. So that's why we renamed it. But I love the idea of putting outreach just right up in the front.
It's funny because after listening to the presentation by Jennifer, the word fight kind of sticks out to me, right? I think that's kind of polarizing. I think in terms of legislators and getting their attention, it's not as neutral. Advocacy comes to mind, education. I don't know if fight would be the word that I would choose.
Okay. Jennifer.
Hi, so I wasn't sure why you were making it shorter when I thought the proposal that the Climate Commission passed on page 8 of our annual report was fantastic. So I don't know, I would love to hear more about the goals. But I will also say that I think for it to be successful, we should be open to RFPs to nonprofits or for-profit experts in communications, because quite frankly, don't think that in-house government communications experts are necessarily going to give us the best result. And so the idea of having bureaucrats spend government money on this, as opposed to culturally competent nonprofits and marketing experts, concerned me. There was an ask that Jabari made to me to find out how much money do people spend on such budgets. So I did reach out to a number of states and experts on that topic, and people were basically saying nobody ever gave them as much money to do what needed to be done. So there was not a case study that was perfect, but I did put in the chat 4 resources that did offer some examples. One thing that I'm looking at is how this committee dovetails in with a different committee of the Climate Commission. The Mitigation Committee is working on a series of recommendations around how we're going to raise revenue for the climate agenda. And in that meeting, which is coming up, I think it's next week, and I hope people will listen in on that. We're going to look at 3 different potential ways to raise money. But what was interesting to me is that amongst those proposals, they were saying how they would spend the money. And at no point did they say in spending the money that communications to encourage nonprofits, businesses, and private sector and individuals, faith organizations, et cetera, to make their own contribution to solving these problems. And so what they did was they had things like X% of the budget was going to go to this item or that item. I'd love to see us, instead of saying how many millions of dollars, Dana Stein has a bill on with fees on some of the carbon shipments. I'd love to see, for example, 1% of the money that comes in be devoted to encouraging non-governmental actors to do their part to solve the pollution voluntarily, so that it's a public-private, nonprofit, faith-based partnership.
And I'd love to piggyback off of what you said, Jennifer. A lot of the RFPs we've seen come out have the language of DVBEs or MBEs. So really including those protected classes as, a portion of that budget, ensuring that, it's getting into the right hands, but not necessarily outlining the different demographics.
Great feedback. Also, Jennifer had run some campaigns that were statewide. I'm not sure that hers was a 3-year campaign, multimedia, not necessarily with the website, but we can add a website cost in, and she also recommends some costs for an average website. This was a campaign for the California Highway Patrol. It was $600,000 per year of media buys. And I think that's low for us. I think we have to be more than that, but the California Highway Patrol at least gives us some defensible numbers. which we found at the main commission meeting was the big problem in getting the budget number put in. We needed a defensible number,
Right.
something
And
to rely on.
I can just say that I see that Jeff Silva has joined, and at the last Climate Commission meeting, he had a chart that showed on the transportation subsidies to try and get people to go green. I think it was in EVs, Jeff, if I'm not mistaken, that the number one best investment was the public education campaign. And I don't know if he has that chart to share with this particular committee, but it was completely relevant to the work that we're doing.
Oh, that's wonderful, Jeff. I would love if you would share that with us.
I don't know if he can hear us. I saw his name pop up.
He's there. He's muted, but he is there. I see him still on the meeting. If necessary, I can, if he can't come off mute, I can email him directly. I'm fairly sure we have his email address. I'm writing myself a note in my notes from the meeting to reach out to Jeff. Okay. Well, that'd be wonderful. Again, more defense when we get to the commission. We can absolutely add details about making sure we're putting things out as RFPs. Chris and Jabari, if you can chime in here too. So when we were working, and Laura, when we were working on these recommendations, and then we did a second round, Jared was on that call as well. The discussion was, we were looking back at past commission reports and realizing that last year's recommendations ballooned compared to years and years prior. And the length of the recommendation doesn't necessarily correlate to it getting action taken. So we thought, instead of digging into the minute details, this needs to be an RFP. We wanted to only hit the top line major things that would have needed to be included in the legislation, because the organizations we're suggesting to run these recommendations would be given it's their responsibility to run the program. Doesn't necessarily mean they have to do all the work. They can absolutely outsource it. So that was one of the thoughts that we had. And Chris and Jabari, if you can, because that also applies to the second recommendation, which is the schools. We weren't getting super into the weeds of those.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you said it right, Amy. And I think I saw Chris's hand earlier. I thought I did. But I mean, the main premise was, the more wordy, the more details we add, the more exposure we have to more scrutiny. So that's why we want to kind of keep it more simple this time, and still put in all the main highlights we wanted to mention, but again without that detail. So I think that's the reason why we made it a little bit shorter, made it a little bit more succinct, basically.
I concur with that. I concur. I mean,
thank you. I appreciate it.
And been going through this process for a number of years now. I picked up on a pattern where it just takes one line to really derail the commission, and if we don't get buy-in on this important step forward, we're gonna be right back here next year trying to wordsmith it. So the goal was just to move this, I think really good recommendation, and to make it look different enough than the previous year's recommendation that the ECO resubmit something sort of in line with the previous recommendation, but different, because the commission doesn't want to see a recommendation that they've already voted on. They want to see a recommendation that's different. And I think this is different enough, but still captures the spirit of it that we want to move forward.
I think it's important to keep in mind too that the RFP is going to be a lot more extensive once the funding is received. That's where we're going to outline how the funds are going to be utilized. So I like keeping it short and sweet. The one thing I might add or kind of organize a little bit differently is I really like how the bottom portion under recommendation 2 is broken out into these 3 prongs. I think we could kind of add those prongs in the second paragraph here, where we're talking about implementing an educational and multimedia campaign. again, still keeping it simple. I just think it could be laid out a little bit more easier to digest so that we can like, really pick out what those prongs are.
Okay. Well,
So
there's
Jessica, maybe more so like bulletize it. Would that make it easier to read, you think?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, under that second recommendation where you have advancing climate literacy, developing climate action plans, and then expanding the green schools,
Oh,
I think you could technically elaborate a little bit on, what you envision for a multimedia campaign, or how you envision blending the education aspect. It doesn't have to be 3 prongs. It can be 2 prongs. It can be 1 prong. I just think it makes it a little bit easier to digest.
right. Okay.
okay. I think we can definitely do that with a prong for the interactive campaign and a prong for the website,
Yeah, I think that would be great. That's a great suggestion.
because they complement each other
Mhm.
in a lot of ways, but they are separate actions.
And I think that we would really have to work on the website before we could get to that part 2 of placing media or anything.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, Laura, you got your hand up.
Yep, I'm curious about something that Jennifer said earlier about the mitigation committee and the dollars that they were referencing and the fact that there wasn't communication. Is there any way, and maybe it's not this year with this, but to communicate with them what we're doing so that we could tie some of those things together? If something came from 2 committees, would it have a stronger chance of being looked at and approved by the MCCC, by the overarching group?
A great question. Chris, what are your thoughts on that? I don't know if that's happened previously where, multiple working groups have kind of suggested things together and there have been overlap, and it would be great.
We've been trying to get the working groups to coordinate and collaborate for years, somewhat unsuccessfully. But I think that the way that the work groups were sort of stood up and designed was to, stay in their lane, if you so to speak. But I think that there's a lot of discussion about funding around within the MWG working group. So there is some natural overlap there, and maybe enough.
Okay.
Can I just comment, Amy?
Yeah.
Chris. So with the Chesapeake Bay program and the working groups that they have, they're also set up kind of independently, but there is an opportunity periodically for those groups to do some things together. But it is, I would say, not with great effect, but but even just having those initiating kind of conversations, I think helps people to see some of that overlap. Anyway.
Jennifer?
I'm wondering for Chris, if maybe Amy or Jabari could have 2 minutes of the agenda on the mitigation working group to say that we would love, when you're doing the revenue bill, for 1% of the money to go towards creating public communications that will create an atmosphere of public, private, nonprofit, et cetera, partnership. If maybe they could be on the agenda to cite that, since it's not in what has been proposed so far to the mitigation committee. And I don't think anybody's against it. Let's keep in mind that last year the commission did pass the recommendations of this committee. It really was excited about public education. The only piece that didn't pass was the dollar amount, but they weren't against the other pieces. They were very supportive.
Well, we did lose. We had 2 out of 3 get approved. One didn't make it, and just as we were talking about words in the commission, really diving in on something, the word curriculum became such a concern that the second recommendation was voted down instead of edited. So we definitely want to. Yeah, and right, and there was no funding, and the funding is, funding for these things is kind of important, but I'm wondering whether if we get a chance to speak to the mitigation working group and we get them, at least we get a better understanding of their proposal or their recommendation, we can just reference it.
Just to follow up to Jennifer's proposal, Jabari, I defer to you on that, since that I really view me and the other MDE staff as more of a facilitation role. So I wouldn't want to speak on behalf of the working group as a member. I'm really just here to support the process, and Jared as well. So you're on the hook for that. But I think it's a great idea.
Thanks, Chris. No, I do agree. I think it's a great idea as well. So yeah, we just look at those times and let me know when that meeting is.
There is a very specific agenda with very specific proposals to vote on, and members of the commission are allowed to and encouraged to make adaptation suggestions, amendments to them. So it would be good, I think, Jabari or Amy, whichever one of you speaks, to come with like a 2-sentence line of what the money would go towards. It is very simple and consensus driven, not a long thing like this.
Right.
1 or 2 sentences.
Okay.
Yeah, and I have the, Jabari, did you get them too? I have their recommendations. I just got them.
Let's see. I don't believe I got them.
I got them. I'll share them with you. I just got them. I haven't even had time to digest them yet.
Okay. Yeah.
So, because it's many pages, and yeah, they just came over from Mark. So I'll send those to you.
Okay.
All right, so we have quite a few edits to make to recommendation 1 and a couple of things that are pending. Let's move on to recommendation 2 for discussion, since we have about 20 minutes left. Jabari, this one's you.
Yeah. All right. Recommendation 2 is that's basically to develop Maryland's next generation of environmental and climate change leaders. Of course, you all know that is a big deal, fostering the next generation of these leaders, because our state has very ambitious climate goals, which is a good thing. But we want to make sure that our, I guess, future generation, current generation, however you want to say it, they're prepared to meet these needs, that they are employed in this field, and to get that employment, they need to be well educated in this. So that sets up the premise for our recommendation 2. And it looks a little bit lengthy. It's because we basically put a little bit more detail in these 3 different points. And it's pretty simple. This recommendation already has a foundation of just pretty much either adding or expanding things that are kind of already really being done in the state right now. So, of course, the first one is the advancing climate literacy. We'll get the Department of Education involved to review some of the state's new environmental literacy standard framework. So the framework is really already there. It will also include, basically to include climate change in this framework. And also it will allow us to have build some awareness and training into that. As you all can see, we did actually include an actual amount in this one, a budget of $2.5 million, which we think is fairly small. I think that's pretty humble amount. And then the second one is developing climate action plans. And my understanding is there are actually already a few school systems that have climate action plans. So this is based on each school. Do you say system or district? Either one. And I know Prince George's County already has one, because I work in Prince George's County, and I think I've worked with them on that. So some schools already have a climate action plan, but this will actually be something, again, that's already been required by an executive order. So we want to make sure, we kind of want to push this and make sure these school systems are doing these climate action plans, and of course, hopefully following them. And then the last thing is expanding the Maryland Green Schools program. Again, we already have these green school programs all across the state. We're basically just looking to expand what we currently have, and then add some resources to that expansion. That pretty much sums up recommendation 2. Again, a lot there, but then again, the foundation is already there. So I think, Corrine, I see your hand up first. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks. And I know I'm not an eco work group member, so if you need me to not speak, I don't
That's
have
right.
to. Well, I just want to point out for consideration, switching the term next generation out of this phrasing, specifically because we have next generation science standards, which could get confused. And the ARWG group has a project called Next Gen something or other. And when it comes up in other climate meetings that I'm involved in the DNR, I hear Next Gen and I immediately think of science standards, but that's not what they're talking about. And so if they think we're talking about next generation in this context, maybe steer away from using that term and come up with some kind of another term to say that same thing. And then the last little piece that I just kind of wanted to acknowledge here too is the conversation that happened a few moments ago regarding kind of the intersectionality between the recommendations coming out of the mitigation work group could be, you know, and crosswalking those with these to see if there's any kind of potential to, you know, see how they might leverage one another. You know, there's not really a landscape of how Maryland's school sector or education sector, kindergarten all the way up through, you know, college graduation and our higher education, to get a sense of what percentage our greenhouse gas mitigation goals could be met were we to really focus on K-12 education and higher education and put those in like all the other sectors that are in those mitigation plans. So I know nationally there's information about that. And it's substantial. It's surprising how much schools and school grounds and future voters and future, you know, workforce that's kind of calculated into those figures can contribute to a mitigation plan when you take schools and you put them in there intentionally. So maybe there's an opportunity, if there is some funding that comes available through that mitigation recommendation, that some of it can go into a landscape assessment of what how schools would help us meet our mitigation goals in our state. How would school systems, how would educating workforce, how would all of those things contribute to reducing those greenhouse gas emissions and meeting our goals? So that's just a thought. I'll put it out there, you know, to fly around in the ether, but that's just what's going around in my ether here. So.
Okay.
Laura?
Yeah, thanks, Corinne.
Kind of just to address that, Corinne, Mayo, the Maryland Association for Environmental and Outdoor Education, is looking to change their conference this next year in February 2025. And the first day is going to be around school district and high impact sustainability. Both Thursday and Friday will look at how the school district, the first day really is partly how the school district is communicating what actions they're taking so that others can hear it, and be aware of the carbon reduction and other things in line with what you were just saying about job potential and education that can grow from that, benefit from that. And then the second day is really about that intertwining of sustainable impacts, environmental impacts from the district level to the schools and the curriculum, and whether it's through green schools or other mechanisms, having those conversations. Because I think one of the things that we've talked about at Mayo is really making a change so that we're able to reach more effectively the decision makers in the school districts, and that they can hear and participate in some of those discussions collectively. Anyway.
Yeah,
Thanks.
good. Very good points, Laura.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead, Amy.
And hold it. Jessica has her hand up too.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight, I think Astrid had to hop off, but she put something in the comments about highlighting opportunities for high school graduates. And something that I want to bring up is the ability to be integrated into the blueprint, the Maryland State Department of Education's Blueprint for Success. This is a 10-year program. They have tons of funding, and they're still in the planning stages. If we
What
are
is it called again, Jessica? I'm sorry.
Maryland State Blueprint, let me just, Jabari, I'll send it to you because I know I'm miswording.
Okay.
But
Okay.
it's essentially Maryland's education blueprint for the next 10 years, which would kind of address two things. the job market afterwards, green jobs, people who want to enter the sector don't know how, and also the education piece. Now, the other thing that I want to bring up is you have $85K per school system, just based on the MSDE on their blueprint RFPs that they've released recently. For a facilitator, for somebody who would facilitate their programs, they're at least putting around 100,000 per district. So that's just something to note there.
Excellent.
Jessica, what is the 100,000 per district for?
They're for facilitators. So for each district, for each learning area, I believe they're called LEAs. They have a facilitator who's then going to facilitate the plan that's put in place from the larger strategic plan.
So
Around
would that be-
education. Sorry, I'm sorry, Dewari.
No, go ahead, Laura. No, you go ahead.
I was just going to say the plans around the blueprint and how they're responding to the blueprint. Is that right? Okay.
Correct. They're kind of, essentially the local oversight and implementation.
So is that something possible we could look at? I guess adding something similar for point 2, developing the climate action plan. Is that kind of what you're suggesting for that one?
Yeah, for that one, because I think, well, that and also, sorry, I'm trying to read and talk at the same time.
Sorry. Let me see if I can.
Yeah, for the action plan.
Yeah, good point. I mean, there may be some systems, you know, who really do need that guidance to kind of help them develop what, you know, what a climate action plan would look like for their area, for their system. So having that facilitator would be a good idea. I don't know how many school systems there are, or at least public school systems that I guess we're looking at. But maybe that could be worked or reworked into the 2.5 million. Amy, Laura?
Yeah, I'm
Possibly
curious.
Chris.
Like we talked about Prince George's County doing it. I wonder if Donald has any idea of whether they outsourced it, whether it was something they did internally, if there was a cost associated with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Donald, by any chance, are you on?
I'm on. Say the initial. Can you repeat the question?
So we were just wondering, you know, in developing climate action plan, your climate action plan for Prince George's County Public Schools, you know, was it something you did in-house versus outsourcing? Was cost tracked or level of effort tracked? Did you need outside resources, or is it just something y'all did yourself?
So I would say primarily this was an effort that was initiated by one of our Board of Education members, Board Member Boozer Struther, as well as you know, some of the community members. And we don't quote me, but I want to say spent about a year working on different components of the plan, including staff members within PGCPS, but also community members to help guide the process. So I think primarily it was in-house, but Board Member Boozer Struther may have reached out to other individuals as well in developing the plan. There was also a good deal of collaboration between our school system and Prince George's County government. At the time where we started working on the plan, I was one of the 14 commissioners on the Prince George's County plan. So Prince George's County also has a climate action plan. And so I was able to help serve as a liaison between the Prince George's County government group and in the school system when we sought after developing our school system specific plan. And I know that really helped as well, because the county's plan, I think, probably provided some structure and, you know, certain a leg up in terms of our planning. And that county plan did utilize consultants associated with that work.
Okay.
Sure. And that brings a good point. I was just going to say, you know, some of these school systems actually probably they are located in counties that have a plan that already exists. So that would be something that maybe those, individual school systems could build off on. You don't necessarily have to recreate the entire wheel, use part of or use the county plan as a guide. If we're not going to recommend, having facilitators, because.
Yeah, and also, I mean, we did include in here, the governor's executive order is requesting all the state departments to submit climate implementation plans, which means the State Department of Education is going to have to do one. And that will exist as well. So it all kind of needs to coordinate in with that, but it's good. It's really good to point out that they should be coordinating with their counties. I love the idea of collaborating with the citizens. I think that's phenomenal.
Yeah.
And we have Corrine's got her hand up first, then Peyton.
I just want to point out something.
Oh, sorry, Jessica. I was going to let Peyton go before me, but go ahead.
That's okay. I just wanted to point out something really quick with the facilitators. There are counties like PG County who are active, but then there's counties like Harper County who refuse to acknowledge that it exists. So I think having a facilitator per county would really entrap them into having to be active. And that's all.
Okay. Great. Peyton, you want to go first, and then we'll
Sure.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to acknowledge that, I'm not a member of this group, so I can't necessarily comment at length on any of these recommendations in their current form. But I definitely want to flag that, our contacts and leadership within MSDE would definitely be interested to review and provide some feedback, because some of the nuance here with the standards and the statute relating to standards in the blueprint are important. So just want to make sure I let you guys know that I'm picking up what you're putting down and make sure to send it to the appropriate folks.
Yeah, please do. We did send this out as a PDF ahead of time to the members, so they should have gotten it. That doesn't mean they had time to digest it or realize how significant MSDE would play in this particular recommendation.
Mm-hmm.
So
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Corrine?
Yeah, 2 recommendations again, and these are kind of nebulous. The first one is there are fabulous online resources to support the creation of climate action plans, especially around education that exist. NAAE has a really great one. I'm going to put one in the chat right now that is, oh Lord, my mouse just blew everything up on me. Hang on one second. Yeah, that really can help us kind of walk through, there we go, some of the different next steps or language practices or anything like that that can help support state level policy or even district level policies around climate school related things. And then the only other thing I was going to say, so that was the first thing. And the second thing is, and I forgot it when my thing blew up. I'm sorry. There was a second thing, and it was, and Peyton, you made me think of it when you were talking. We have a partnership that exists, the Outdoor Learning Partnership already, and the governor did sign a new executive order this spring on Earth Day, and there is language in that new executive order that empowers us as partners to engage in climate education and to build climate literacy in the state. So there is an executive order that supports all of this stuff, and it could be really a nice toolkit or tool in the toolkit to pull out when need be with the other members of the commission. So just a reminder that exists, and that was an executive order.
Yeah, and we definitely include them in the climate literacy, the Outdoor Learning Partnership, in the climate literacy section, knowing that that's part of your mission, right? So I think that's the important part, is that we're talking about MSDE partnering with the Outdoor Learning Partnership to work towards getting climate change. We're not going to say the word curriculum. We know that's bad word, but incorporated into what already exists, the already existing curriculum, right? We're not making a change. The environmental literacy standards are phenomenal. Climate change is listed in 2 appendices. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, any other feedback on this one? Because I am going to have to get off the phone in 4 minutes, and I'm going to turn it over to you, Jabari.
Okay.
sorry, I can't stay late today, but here's our last one, which is, Jerry, if you want to talk about it, it's a repeat, but a
Yeah.
much shortened down version of the previous one.
Yes, very short, because and this was actually is a pretty quick recommendation. Something we did already start, and this really builds on the climate teach-in that our group started. And the recommendation basically is to reintroduce the bill. You know, we had House Bill 993, which was to proclaim the first week in April as Climate Education Week. And we were able to provide written oral testimony to the House. The House passed it, and it made it to the Senate, and it kind of got stuck in the Senate. The good news was that the governor did proclaim that first week as Climate Education Week. So it came from the governor's office, but that's an annual process, which means we will have to do that again. And very likely it would be, same situation. We'll probably get that same week again, hopefully. But we want to make this more of a permanent fixture in Maryland. In order to do that, it needs to be passed by the entire General Assembly. So we're basically going to reintroduce this bill. Slight different approach. This time we're going to make more of a bipartisan effort, and as well as we're going to actually ask for letters of support from the governor's office as well as MDE. Since we already have the support, we know that we have it. Now we're going to just ask for you to basically show it, for those agencies, those offices to show that support through either written or oral testimony, so that we can hopefully pass this bill all the way through. That's pretty much what this recommendation 3 outlines. So are there any questions or comments to that? Yep, Corinne.
At the beginning of this section of the meeting, we talked about that maybe only one of the 3 recommendations would be elevated. Did I misunderstand that?
No, all three.
All three.
All three.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. Thank you. That's
Mhm.
great.
Well, that was the only question. That was great.
That's great.
So I
Okay.
think everybody agrees with this, right? No changes that need to be made on this.
Oh,
Yeah, Peyton?
I just have a question. Would this recommendation be for reintroducing and passing this bill as it read previously, or would there be opportunities for revision?
When we had Delegate Stein on last week or last meeting,
meeting,
it was just to reintroduce it as is, and he was going to work with us to find some bipartisan support.
Right.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Yep.
The only thing, I think I said this before, Amy, but it will have a different number this year. So I don't know. I think you could reference it in terms of reintroducing it,
Mhm.
but passing it, and it does say 2024 House bill. But anyway, it's just gonna.
And maybe just add the word former.
Okay.
Well, yeah, something like that. Something to that effect.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, I'm sorry I have to jump off. I'm going to let y'all go. We do need to open it up for public comment before we finish, and we have to come up with a plan to coordinate any small edits after this next round of revisions, as well as a vote. I'm going to leave that to you all. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. All right. And Chris, if you're still there, you can also help me out as well. Were there any more comments or suggestions to the recommendations that we have? All right, so it looks like we'll be able to edit some of those and resend them to you all again for a second review, basically. And at that point, then we'll have to pretty much vote on those. Jeff, yeah. Well, hold on. Jeff, we're just about to get to the public comment section right now. And just want to make sure there's no other things that want to be said first before we open up the meeting for the public comment. All right, Eco. Okay, well, Jeff, go at it.
I'm sorry, if I could just interject for one moment.
Okay.
Do we want to decide on the potential for another meeting between now and September 19th, as Amy put in the comments? Just before we open up for public comment, I want to settle that issue.
Yeah, well, actually, you know what? That's a question I would ask the group. We may not need a full meeting. We may, need to correspond by. We are going to have to take a vote, so it could be a short meeting. I take that back. We probably will have to have a short meeting before that time. Jennifer, you wanted to add something really quick.
I don't know if we should put it in any of the texts or any of the recommendations, but I do want to lift up that we had a very big climate crisis with Debbie this past week, significant flooding in a lot of areas, including where I live. And I didn't have a sense that there was a government plan to push out climate content when there was media interest and public interest in the topic. And that it would be very helpful to have, just basic facts like what is the cost to the state in terms of lives, livelihoods, employment, et cetera, around climate that then can be connected to whatever real-time climate event is happening, because we really did not get that. And I thought it was an opportunity missed when so many people's homes and businesses are flooded, that we're not communicating the larger goals and agendas at that time. And so I don't know how we can do that, but if there's a way to stick it into one of these things, I think it could be helpful.
Okay. Just making a quick note about that. Okay. So Jeff, before I get to you, we probably will need just maybe 30 minutes for the next meeting before September 19th. So it shouldn't take long. We won't need a whole hour and a half. The basic plan at that point will be to, of course, read over these recommendations, the second review before we meet, and then we're going to go ahead and meet on those recommendations. And of course, if there are any questions or comments before that time, we'll address those, and then we'll go ahead and make that vote then. So we'll probably have to get back to you, and Jerry, let me know how this, I guess we can set this up. We'll probably just have to send you all a meeting request between now and then, probably early next month, maybe, or maybe the end of this month, possibly. Anybody have any questions about that? Okay. All right. Well, I know we're over time a little bit. So Jeff, is there something you'd like to add? We're basically open the meeting up for public comment this time.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, just barely though, kind of low, but we can hear you.
All right, well, thank you very much. I hope you saw the link that I sent concerning the presentation that Jennifer had referenced that I gave to a previous meeting. And there's that. It's MCCC's own material that you could use to be able to show them that you need to be funded and your activities need to be encouraged and adopted and accepted and brought into prominence before the public. I'm right now vacationing in Ocean City, and just yesterday I was engaged in a conversation about climate change. I drove an electric car and people started a conversation about it because it's a curiosity here. And I hopefully gave them the straight information. But there is so much disinformation, it's discouraging and wilting in our drive towards being able to remove ourselves from our fossil fuel addiction. So thank you very much. You folks are really tackling the details. I know it's deep into the minutia. It's a wonder to watch. As a person who visits and watches every one of the work group meetings that I could have possibly vet of all the different work groups, I have a peculiar insight, and ECO needs to really come into the public view. And I would hope that you would turn around and maybe auto convention shows or presentations like parades, even reach out to the climate revolt movement and say, listen, you're trying to publicize our need to be able to do something about climate change. And we're going to host this parade. We need you to be at the front of it, and we want to give you the recognition that we all need to pitch into that. And you've been trying to make us go in that direction. And we're here, and we're trying to make everybody else, not make everybody else, but convince people. So I don't know. But I just invalidated everything I just said by saying I don't know. Goodbye. Good luck.
Thanks so much, Jeff. We appreciate you as always. Thank you for those comments. All right. Anybody else? I think Jeff might have been the only other person on from for the public section today. So
Can I ask a question for clarification?
yes.
So Jennifer, are you on the other working group, the mitigation working group?
I'm a commissioner, so I sit in on whatever I can sit in on.
Okay. So so is there something, and maybe Jabari and Amy already know this, to try to get 2 minutes to make that connection with that next meeting? Or I would hate for us to miss an opportunity if there could be one created.
And I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to make that next meeting because I'm a delegate to the Democratic Convention and it's in conflict with the same time. So I'm hoping somebody else can handle that piece.
If I can interject for a moment, great question, Laura. I can definitely pitch that to those that are going to create the agenda for the meeting. I'll coordinate with Jabari and Amy so that we can have a proposal for them for the next meeting.
Great, thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Yep.
very much.
Thanks, Jerry. Appreciate that.
Thanks, Laura.
All right. Yeah. Well, thank you all. If there is nothing else at this point, what I'll try to do is I'll work with Amy to see maybe we can come up with 3 different times and dates that may work and probably get the best one out of that from those times that would work best for another meeting, a short meeting between now and September 19th. And if there's nothing else at this point, then we'll look forward to seeing you around that time. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate you. Have a good one.
Thank you. Be well, everyone.
Yes.